challenging the label of Muslim terrorists. I'm Cleofe from the Cleofe podcast. Let's move on to the deep dive, but as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to help spread the word. Also, if you like to contribute to our Dawah, spreading Islam all over the globe, mission, then hit the join and thanks buttons. Now, Jack and Wilson, we'd love to hear your deep dive.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into some really challenging source material, stuff that really pushes back against some common political ideas.
That's right. These sources look at how certain labels get assigned. You know, those really loaded terms that define conflicts, define people.
And how surprisingly, fragile they can be. We're basically looking at the very subjective nature of political language.
Exactly. And our mission here really is to use these sources to analyze how the term terrorist specifically isn't always an objective fact. It's often more of a political tool.
Okay.
And we're starting with something the sources flag as a major misconception, something that really took hold, especially after events like 9/11 or the '77 London bombings.
Ah, yes, I think I know the one you mean, the statement that all Muslims are not terrorists, but all terrorists are Muslims.
That's the one. It's a huge statement, and our sources really take issue with it. They start by asking a fundamental question. What does terrorist even mean?
Right. Before we can even touch that big claim, we need to agree on the word itself.
Precisely. And the sources offer, two ways to look at it. First, there's the very literal meaning. Simply a person who causes terror.
Okay.
But that's super broad, isn't it? Like sources point out, a police officer chasing a criminal definitely caused a terror to the criminal.
Huh. Yeah, okay. So under that literal definition, the cop is a terrorist to that specific person.
Exactly. Which is, as you say, shows how that literal definition isn't very useful in like a political discussion. It doesn't help with right or wrong.
Doesn't tell you much, yeah.
So the sources then pivot to the definition we usually mean. The one that tries to add a moral dimension. Someone who terrorizes innocent human beings.
Right. That sounds more like the common understanding. Violence against the innocent.
But that's where it gets tricky, isn't it? Because who gets to define innocent? The sources argue that's almost always decided by whoever holds the power.
Okay, so let's dig into that, using the history the sources bring up. The main point seems to be the same person doing the exact same thing. So I can get two completely different labels. And it just depends on, who's looking at it.
That's the core idea.
Yeah.
And they give a really clear historical example, colonial conflicts. Think about India, say, 60, 70 years back, fighting for independence from Britain.
Okay, yeah, the independence movement.
Right. Now, their actions, they often involve confrontation, sometimes violence, against the British authorities, the rulers. So the British government, the power at the time.
They called them
terrorists. Plain and simple. That was the official label.
But, and this is the key part, right? The ordinary people in India, they saw those same people
doing the same thing
as freedom fighters or patriots.
Exactly. It's a perfect split. The label completely hinges on whose side you're on, essentially.
Yeah.
If you accepted the British right to rule, then maybe terrorists fits from that view.
Disrupting legitimate authority.
Right. But if you were like most Indians and thought the British were just, occupiers, then those same people were heroes, patriots defending their homeland.
So the label changes based on your political viewpoint, not necessarily the action itself.
So that's what the sources argue. It's less about the violence itself, though, that's obviously part of it, and more about the political framing of that violence. Who gets to say why it's happening?
It seems simple on the surface, power dictates labels, but it feels like there's a deeper complexity there. Do the sources talk about the morality? Like violence is still violence?
That's a great point. What's interesting is the sources aren't really trying to make a moral judgment on the violence itself in these examples. They're focused on the mechanics of how the labels get applied.
I see. So how the word terrorist versus patriot functions politically.
Exactly. They highlight that the difference between those two labels often isn't the act, but the perceived political goal. And crucially, who's doing the perceiving. And this isn't just, an isolated historical thing.
Right. You mentioned it happens globally. So this pattern, it's repeated. Leaders who were once seen as like the ultimate enemy becoming national heroes.
Oh, absolutely. The sources point directly to the American Revolution, 1775.
George Washington.
Yeah. When the British Crown was the ruling power in the colonies, Washington was leading an insurgency, right? His actions were seen as treason against the king.
And the British didn't just think it, they labeled him officially, didn't they?
They did. The sources state the British government actually designated him terrorist number 1.
Wow. Terrorist number one, the man who becomes the first U.S. president.
Think about that. The father of the country, celebrated everywhere now, was officially branded the top terrorist by the superpower of the day.
So how did that change? He didn't suddenly become nonviolent?
No. It changed because his side won. The power structure flipped entirely. The ones who called him a terrorist were defeated, and a new authority emerged that called him a hero. The label changed because the power changed.
That's a massive shift when power changes hands completely. But you mentioned Nelson Mandela, too. That seems different. It happened more within the same country initially.
It is different, and maybe even more striking in some ways. For decades, South Africa's white apartheid government saw Mandela as, well, public enemy number one, a huge threat.
They locked him up for ages, right? Robben Island.
Over 25 years. And yes, their official label for him, also terrorist number one.
So the same label again. But his story didn't end with violent revolution overthrowing a government in the same way.
No, it involved immense international pressure, internal change, negotiation.
Yeah.
Eventually, apartheid was dismantled, Mandela was freed, and then...
He received the Nobel Peace Prize.
Exactly. And the sources hammer this point home. He got the Nobel Peace Prize for the very same political struggle, the same activities that got him labeled a terrorist and imprisoned for nearly 3 decades.
That's quite something. The same actions, viewed through a different political lens years later, go from terrorism to peacemaking.
It really forces you to think, doesn't it? These leaders, Washington, Mandela, they took enormous risks. They knew the existing power structure saw them as criminals, as terrorists.
The label only shifted because the definition of what was legitimate or right changed fundamentally, either through winning a war or through this massive moral and political shift.
And the sources use this to expose what they see as the core issue. These individuals didn't necessarily have a moral change of heart, becoming good after being bad. The label changed because the power structure deciding the label changed.
Right. Or society's view of the power structure changed.
Precisely. It suggests terrorist is often fundamentally a political description used by those in power to delegitimize and criminalize their opponents.
Okay, so history shows this pattern with specific identifiable leaders, Washington, Mandela. How does this connect back to that statement we started with, the one about all terrorists are Muslims? That feels broader.
It is broader, and that's the crucial link the sources make. When the state, the power structure, can point to a specific enemy leader like Washington or Mandela, they use media, propaganda, whatever, to fix that terrorist label onto the individual.
Makes sense. Target the leader.
But what happens when the opposition isn't one person? When it's more diffuse, maybe decentralized, maybe linked by, say, culture or ideology or faith, especially in the post-9/11 world.
Ah, I see where this is going. You can't just label one guy terrorist, no one.
Exactly. So the sources argue the power structure then shifts tactics. Instead of labeling an individual, they start to generalize the label. They apply it, or try to apply it, to the entire group the perceived threat comes from.
So it moves from political opponent to scapegoating a whole demographic.
That's the mechanism the sources describe. It generates these broad, sweeping statements like all terrorists are Muslims. It takes a political conflict, or acts by a few, and uses the label to paint an entire global religion or culture with the same brush. It turns politics into something that feels like a clash of civilizations via that generalization.
Which brings us right to what the sources call the most important weapon today.
The media. Yeah.
They say whoever is in power uses the media to make their chosen labels stick.
They're very strong on this point. The source material literally says the media has the power to turn black into white, day into night, hero into villain, villain into hero.
Wow.
It's presented as this incredibly powerful tool for shaping mass perception. The way the powerful take their label, their narrative, and establish it as fact for everyone else. Especially potent when it's used to generalize onto huge groups.
Okay, so if the media is this powerful, potentially biased weapon, what do we do? How do we navigate this? The sources must offer some advice, right?
They do. They shift towards urging extreme critical thinking. And interestingly, they pull in a specific ethical instruction to really emphasize the need for, like, fact-checking before you just accept something.
An ethical instruction. From where?
They quote the Quran, Surah Al-Hujurat, chapter 49, verse 6.
Okay, what does it say?
It says basically, O ye who believe, if a wicked person comes to you with any news, ascertain the truth. Like, verify it, lest ye harm people unwittingly, and afterwards become full of repentance for what ye have done.
Huh. So verify news, especially if the source might be unreliable, before you act on it or believe it, so you don't accidentally harm someone based on bad info.
Pretty much.
Ah.
And connecting that back to our topic, the sources seem to use this ancient ethical rule as a timeless command. Analyze critically. Verify. Especially when the news involves potentially damaging labels, and especially if the source, maybe the media, maybe a political figure, might have their own agenda. The wicked person could be anyone spreading unverified, harmful information.
So it frames critical thinking not just as smart, but as a kind of moral duty to avoid causing harm through just blindly believing.
That seems to be the implication. Protect yourself and others from the harm of misinformation, especially labels, by doing your homework.
Okay, so the final takeaway, the core instruction from these sources for you, the listener, is?
It's very direct. Don't just blindly accept what the media or anyone in power tells you, especially about these charged political labels. Check it, confirm it, verify it, then decide if you believe it.
And there was something else, too, about judging individuals.
Right. Before labeling any person or endorsing a generalized label on a group, you need to critically look at three things.
Yeah.
1, the specific situation and what was actually happening. 2, the reason for the action, why did they do it? And 3, the intention, what were they genuinely trying to achieve?
Situation, reason, intention. Analyze those before applying a label.
That's the guidance from the sources.
So putting it all together from this deep dive, our sources really demonstrate that the line between terrorist and patriot or freedom fighter is often not about the act itself. It's about perspective.
Yeah, it's about the political viewpoint, the power structure defining the terms, and how that narrative gets pushed, usually through media. It's a definition that can shift dramatically based on geography, time, and ultimately who holds power or who wins the argument.
We really hope exploring this helps you, our listener, to kind of carry this critical lens forward. Think twice when you hear these powerful, polarizing labels being used, especially against entire groups.
Because as the sources suggest, the first casualty in conflict isn't always life. Sometimes it's the meaning of words themselves. Definition gets lost.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought for you to chew on. If media is the most powerful weapon today, like the sources claim, and if labels are so often defined by whoever's currently in power, what actions happening right now, actions maybe being condemned today by powerful nations or media outlets as terrorism or insurgency, might history, say 30 years from now, look back on and label as necessary, as acts of freedom fighting? Makes you think, doesn't it?
Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. I hope you've gained some valuable insights. If you're a truth seeker, yearning for divine light and ready to step out of darkness, now is your moment. The truth is that Allah is the one and only creator of the universe. He has sent over 124,000 messengers and prophets to guide humanity, starting with Adam and culminating with the final messenger, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them all. If you resonate with this message, you might be ready to embrace Islam. Simply recite the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. For further support, feel free to join our WhatsApp group. You can send us a private message there. The link is in the video description. Don't wait until it's too late. We look forward to connecting with you soon.